has actually thrown a javelin at David, really attempting to kill him. He's sent him to battles, kind of hoping he would die. Different things where Saul is trying to make sure that he can get rid of David. Well, why would Saul want to get rid of David? Think on it a second. What did Samuel, we're reading in the book of 1 Samuel, what did Samuel tell David was going to be? That's right, Peter. David's going to be the next king. And Saul's like, yeah, I want my son Jonathan to be king. I don't want David to be king. And so he's trying to get rid of David. But whose plan is it, boys and girls, for David to be king? It's God's plan. Is Saul going to ever be able to defeat God? No, he's not. But Saul is sure trying. He is doing the best he can to kill David. Well, where we pick up today, we've got a meeting or a conversation between Jonathan and David. They're meeting and they're talking, and it's not at the palace. They found a different place to meet. They're meeting and they're talking, and they're having this conversation back and forth. I'm going to read the first verse to you, just kind of help you pick up where we're at. In verse number 1, it says, "And David fled from Naioth to Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, What have I done? What is mine iniquity, and what is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life?" And Jonathan's like, wait, no, you haven't sinned. You haven't done anything wrong. And surely if you had, my dad tells me everything. My dad would tell me. And David's like, let's think about this. Your dad knows we're best friends. Your dad's not going to tell you that he wants to kill me because we're best friends. And Jonathan kind of thinks in that. He's like, oh yeah, you're probably right. As much as my dad tells me everything related to the kingdom, he's probably not going to tell me he wants to kill my best friend. And so they're talking, they're in this conversation. Well, what can we do about it? And David kind of comes up with the first part of the plan, and then Jonathan comes up with the second. The first part of the plan is, he says, all right, we're supposed to have this special feast. I always have this feast with your dad. That's right, lots of food, Peter. I always have this feast with your dad. I'm not going to go to the feast because David's run away. He's not going back to the palace. He says, but you listen and you hear what your dad has to say. Find out if your dad's okay with me missing this feast, or find out if your dad gets angry when I miss this feast. And on the third day, come back and tell me, because this was a feast that was going to last for a few days. So Jonathan's like, okay, that's a good idea. Well, they've got that figured out, that they're going to figure out if Saul's mad that way. But how's he going to tell him? If David can't come back to the kingdom, how's he going to tell him? What's he going to do? Well, while they're still figuring this out, they talk together and they make a promise with one another. And Pinky, that's right, Pinky promise. They promise that whatever happens, they're always going to be best friends, no matter what happens, and they're going to take care of one another's families. Regardless of what Saul does, they're going to take care of each other's families, although they're not really sure what is going to happen. So now they have to come up with that part of the plot, or part of the plan, on how they're going to tell one another what it was, or how they're going to tell one another what happened. So they come up with a plan. The plan is that Jonathan is going to bring out one of the servants. He's going to shoot 3 arrows in an appointed place. And if David is supposed to, if it's safe for David to come back, no problem. He's basically going to tell the servant after he shoots them that shoots the arrows. After he shoots the arrows, that they're beside him or near him. And then David will know that that's the clue that it's all safe. But if he says they're beyond you or they're past you to the servant, then they know that it's not safe for David and David's going to have to run away. So Jonathan and David, they make up this plan. They're all set. They've got this plan in place. There's going to be the feast. They're going to find out. And you're going to have to come back next week to find out. But before I do that, I know I was not sure which order to say that in there. Peter's excited with the javelin. Boys and girls, God had a plan for David. God's plan was for David to be the next king, and regardless of what Saul's going to try, and we're going to find out, he's going to try some more things. We can't interrupt God's plan, as far as we can't change God's plan. God has a plan. God's all-knowing. I was recently talking to one of the kids on my busser about how all-knowing God is. He knows everything, and they were asking me, how does he? He just does. It's something that's hard for our brains to comprehend. God's all-knowing, and he had a plan for David. Regardless of what Saul's going to do, God is going to look over David. And Jonathan is in a very awkward position between his dad and his best friend. Boys and girls, I hope as you go about this week, as things come up and things that you're unsure about, you know that you can talk to an all-knowing God, and that God will always accomplish his will. Boys and girls, we can have a relationship with that God. I hope you do. But you will have to come back next week, or I suppose if you want to read ahead, since it comes from the Bible, you could read ahead in 1 Samuel chapter 20. Read the end of the chapter and find out what happens at that feast. Is Saul going to ask where David is? Or is it going to be safe for David to come back or not safe for David? You'll have to